Introduction. What is the Silk Road? Before us lies not a single line on a map, and not a highway from point A to point B, but a mesh of corridors and anchor hubs that for centuries linked very different landscapes and ways of life. Deserts and mountains, steppes and oases, ports and passes, palaces and caravanserais, each is a component of one living organism. At times it shrank to a handful of safe segments. At times it stretched from East Asia to the Mediterranean. Silk Road is a handy name for this connective tissue, but silk itself is only a symbol. Behind it stands the intricate mechanics of exchange, where goods, money, skills, and ideas travel together, reinforced by rules, measures, and trust. Before we dive into details, a quick sketch of the map helps. The overland system consists of several corridors that ring the Taklamakan desert. The northern route arced through Turfan and Kucha to Kashgar, then through the gates of the Pamirs into the Fergana Valley and on to Sogdiana. The middle route ran by way of Hotan along the nephrite fields on the desert's southern rim. Here, caravans reshuffled loads, took on water and people, and left excess bales behind. The southern route tied the valleys of India and Gandhara to Bactria, Khorasan, and the cities of the Iranian plateau, carrying merchants across the Hindu Kush. These lines worked hand in glove with steppe bypasses from the Seven Rivers region and the Aral hinterland toward the Volga and the Caucasus. Where security depended on nomadic confederations and long distances were covered by speed and discipline. In parallel, a maritime system linked the South China Sea, the Strait of Malacca, the Bay of Bengal, the Indian Ocean, Hormuz, Aden, the Red Sea, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Wind and the monsoon calendar meant to sea routes what snowfall on passes and sandstorms meant to the overland ones. This geography comes alive in time. The network had eras of thickening and thinning. An early upswing came from the linkage of late Han in the east and the Kushan world in Central Asia. The western stretch was steadied by Parthia, and later the Sasanians. Under the Tang, roads often grew safer and translation schools more visible. In oases, monastic scriptoria, merchant courts, and fairs multiplied. Later, for a time, steppe and desert corridors lay under one political roof. Couriers, caravans, and financial settlements accelerated. Downturns are readable by the same signs, only with a minus: protracted frontier warfare, the smashing of key hub cities, epidemics, climatic jolts. Then the overland lines narrowed, and ever more tonnage moved by sea. The system did not go dark. It retuned itself, leaning on alternates and on habits of working together. Who kept the road in working order? Empires provided the frame. They guarded trunk routes, garrisoned posts, levied customs duties, and issued safe conducts. Urban elites in the oases turned hubs into editors of flows. They checked quality, warehoused goods, repaired harness, hired guides and scribes. Nomadic confederations were not obstacles by definition. They ensured through traffic on long empty stretches where there were no walls or gates, but where discipline had a price. Merchant diasporas, Sogdian, Persian, Indian, Arab, and Jewish houses stitched corridors, together with family memory and mutual guarantees. Pilgrims, monks, scholars, and artisans layered a second current onto the bales of goods: texts, maps, recipes, glossaries. In this way, strangers could exchange not only merchandise, but methods. Rules of trust formed the invisible frame. A caravanserai was not just an inn, but a package of services: water, a covered courtyard, storage, veterinary care, guards, news, interpreters, and clerks. Standard weights and measures lived here, seals were checked, and customs duties recorded. Religious centers arbitrated oaths, Endowments for wells and bridges turned piety into infrastructure. Payments mixed bullion-weight silver and goods in kind. As distances lengthened, promissory notes and sureties appeared, so that no one had to haul the full value in metal. Documents and witnesses shaved off part of the risk. The rest was covered by joint responsibility within the caravan and by hired escorts. Wherever such practices were repeated across generations, the road outlasted the next war or crop failure. The label Silk Road tempts us to think the lead story was cloth. In reality, the portfolio was diverse. East to west moved fine textiles, raw and spun silk, paper in sheets and rolls, lacquerware, porcelain, finished metalwork, and compressed tea. West to east moved glass and polychrome enamels from Syrian and Iranian workshops, semi-precious stones, dyes, Indian indigo, Iranian madder, rarer yellows and purples, Arabian aromatics, spices from India and Southeast Asia, high-grade horses from steppe valleys, fine wool, wax, metals, and timber. More utilitarian loads, salt, grain, oil, hides circulated mainly on shorter legs. It was cheaper to feed a neighboring region than haul a jar of oil across the passes. Most important, skills traveled behind things. Paper changed bookkeeping, schooling, and archives. Glass and enamels changed the color palette of daily life. New horse breeds changed warfare and transport. Orchard crops reshaped diets and the look of oases. Technologies moved with objects and stuck wherever demand and craftsmen met. Cultural transmission followed the same roads. Buddhist monasteries offered lodging, libraries, and translators. Manichaean and Christian communities laced cities together. In Western hubs, Islam supplied a shared legal language of commerce and new forms of charity that sustained the road. Markets heard Sogdian and Persian, Turkic vernaculars, Sanskrit and the Prakrits, Chinese, Syriac, and Arabic side by side. Ornament and epigraphy worked as wordless passports. Motifs and formulas let one read an object's origin without a translator. Encounters bred hybrids, architecture that married techniques from different schools, ceramics with foreign motifs, miniatures and textiles where pattern and composition spoke several languages of form at once. This network had a homely logic. A caravan is a budget, a timetable, and assigned duties. On a long leg, you count not only bales and hands, but the mountain's shadow. When the pass will open, how much fodder will vanish, where water is certain, where an escort is prudent. At sea, you count winds and seasons, and you change your loading port if storms sit where calm is the norm. Hubs maintain warehouses and credit against stored goods, so you don't sell cheaply in the wrong season. On the steppe, you gauge the strength of alliances and who must be paid for security. Money here is not only silver, it is also time, packing quality, and timely repair. Profit comes not from pretty legends, but from careful logistics. Equilibrium is mobile, and there is no contradiction in that. Mountains and deserts impose limits, and precisely for that reason, people learn joint planning. When political will and climate align, the network produces an advance effect. Caravanserais go up faster, custom schedules change less, translation schools work harder, and merchant houses survive 3 or 4 generations. When one of the 3 pillars, water, road, text sags, the system stalls. Trunk routes empty, ledgers coarsen, fair calendars slip. Then alternates take over step or sea. The network does not snap, it ressows itself. To help the reader navigate, it is worth setting expectations. First comes detailed geography. Which corridors carried the traffic, how passes and oases worked, and why some cities became editors of flows, while others stayed as storage depots. then a chronology of booms and slumps, the political and natural causes that strengthened or weakened the road, and the censors by which this shows. Next, the actors and institutions, who kept security and rules, how diasporas worked, what translators and notaries did, and what a caravanserai offered as a service bundle. After that, the economy of things and logistics, caravan composition, packing and standards, the budget line by line, risks, and how shares were divided. Then technologies and knowledge, how skills move, and why paper and glass are not just goods, but variables in the equation of memory. Next, cultures and faiths, how systems of meaning eased deals between strangers, and what hybrid forms were born at the seams. Finally, transformations and legacy. Why the end of overland dominance is a change of medium rather than the disappearance of a network, and which traces remain in art, daily life, and institutions. This introduction is not only for orientation, it suggests a way to read. Behind every beautiful object, look for the root and the set of rules that made it possible. Behind every hub, for the people and their long work. Behind every success, for infrastructure and a document. In that light, the Silk Road stops being a flashy metaphor and becomes a rational construction that, once assembled, learned to renew itself despite wars and epidemics. That capacity is why the network proved resilient. Parallel lines ensured one another. Knowledge stuck in schools and habits. Trust persisted, thanks to documents and shared gestures. In this view, silk remains a key symbol, but beside it stand wells and bridges, standard weights, seals, and contract templates, the quiet heroes of long-distance connection between very different worlds. 2. Geography and routes. Corridors, passes, oases, ports. If we view the Silk Road from above as a system rather than a single line, the first thing we see is that it never runs as one thread. It advances in multiples, with built-in duplicates almost everywhere. That redundancy isn't luxury, it's survival. Where war, epidemic, or drought severs one path, a parallel path is ready to catch part of the flow. The overland branches skirt the Taklamakan desert from north and south, leap the ribs of the Pamirs, the Alay, and the Hindu Kush, spread across the steppe and plains of Central Asia and Iran, and on the western side, merge into the roads of Syria and the Levant. In parallel runs a maritime system, the South China Sea, the Strait of Malacca, the Bay of Bengal, the Indian Ocean, the Strait of Hormuz, the Arabian Sea, the Gulf of Aden, the Red Sea, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Between the land and the sea poles, there is sometimes competition and often mutual insurance. Caravans offload part of their goods to ports. Ships relieve the pressure on mountain passes. Hub cities act as editors of flows, redirecting consignments to whichever route is cheaper and safer right now. The northern corridor around the Taklamakan traces a crescent of oases along the foot of the Tian Shan. Its logic is simple. Water is closer, elevations are milder, opportunities to replenish and sit out a storm are more frequent. From Dunhuang, the trail leads to Turfan and Kucha, where canals and vineyards cling to narrow strips of arable land. From there, the road bends to Kashgar. The gate westward. Approaches to the passes lead into the Fergana Valley, and then Sogdiana, where Samarkand and Bukhara control markets, warehouses, and workshops. The northern bypass suited caravans carrying a lot of packing and in need of frequent halts. Its drawback is the long arc and sensitivity to steppe politics. When a steppe confederation is strong and friendly, the corridor thrives. When nomads find it more profitable to levy tribute or close passage, the route becomes expensive. The middle corridor skirts the Taklamakan from the south. It rests on Hotan's belt of nephrite and neighboring oases. Traders came for stone valued in China and sent back bales of textiles and lacquerware. The southern rim is harsher. Fewer large towns, longer dry stretches, a higher price for mistakes in water planning. But here, connections to roads running south toward India and Gandhara and west over the Karakoram into Bactria are easier to stitch. Along this branch, monasteries and forts stand like nails pinning the cloth of the road to the ground, visible from afar, offering lodging, food, interpreters, and news about past conditions. The southern overland run ties the valleys of the Indian subcontinent to Bactria, Khorasan, and the Iranian plateau. Crossing the Hindu Kush is no stroll. Elevation, narrow ledges, snow, loose stone. Caravans moved in steps, choosing seasonal windows when trails opened and rivers were fordable. The reward is quick access to major markets, Merv, Nishapur, Rai, and then to the plateau, where roads splay toward Mesopotamia and Syria. This southern branch was especially valuable in years when the north around the Tian Shan was unsettled. It kept contact with ports on the Indian Ocean, and thus helped balance assortment and price. None of the overland assembly works without the mountain locks, the passes of the Pamirs, the Ale, and the Hindu Kush. These set the caravan's pace. The calendar is not just money, it is snow. In high country, kilometers matter less than hours in shade versus sun. In the early cold morning, animals take altitude more easily. By noon, the wind rises and the steps grow heavy. Guides know avalanche gullies, places where the path disappears, and the old stone shelters where one can wait out an hour of weather. Low cloud that is mere bad weather in the steppe becomes a risk of not returning in the mountains. For the overland system to hold, it needs anchor points. Dunhuang is one. In the Mogao caves, texts were copied and stored for centuries, and at the Yumen, Jade, gate officials controlled transit and collected due customs. Turfan shows stubborn work with water. Vineyards run along qanats, and shade from trellises cuts evaporation. Kashgar is a market and a stable yard, where animals and harness are exchanged before the high climbs. Hotan is where nephrite changed hands. Samarkand and Bukhara are editors in the full sense. They inspect textiles and glass, rebale and retie consignments, hire new handlers and clerks. Merv, Nishapur, and Ray are Persian hubs from which the road fans over the Iranian plateau and toward Mesopotamian lowlands. Each such city has the same core, a square where roads converge, a market where goods are shown to the light, warehouses, workshops, a house where standard weights and yardsticks are kept, and a place where deals are sealed in front of witnesses. Across all overland routes falls the shadow of the steppe, an ample bypass running through Semireki, the Aral forelands, then along the Volga and across the Caucasus to the Black Sea. This is not a mere emergency exit. It is a route with its own economics. Its advantages: high speeds over long straight stretches, the ability to move big herds, a direct tap into furs and northern metals. Its risks: dependence on the politics of steppe alliances. If a confederation is oriented toward trade, a caravan gets armed escort and good terms. If it prefers predation, the road turns into a sequence of ransoms and insurance shades into tribute. Good steppe years are remembered by an abundance of horses in markets and quick convoys. Bad years by stories of how best to wait it out in an oasis. The maritime system is the organism's other half, and older than any specific overland corridor. Its rhythm is the monsoon. From the South China Sea to Malacca, into the Bay of Bengal, and across the Indian Ocean, ships run with seasonal winds planned well in advance. These lines carry bulky and heavy cargo porcelain, sugar, timber, spices, cotton textiles. In return, flow glass, metals, frankincense, and myrrh, fabrics of other weaves, books. Port pairs join sea and land on China's south coast, onward to transshipment points in Southeast Asia, on the Indian side to the Malabar and Coromandel ports, around Hormuz and along Iran's littoral to nodes that hand freight to the caravan roads of Khorasan and Iraq, at the mouth of the Red Sea to Aden, and then across to Egypt and the Levant. Sea legs support land by offloading stress in hard years. When passes are closed, ships shoulder most of the long-haul burden. Infrastructure is the key to resilience. A caravanserai at an oasis or pass is not just walls around a yard. It is a service bundle, water, hayloft, harness repair, a forge, veterinary care, interpreter and scribe, a notice board of road news. Standard weights and yardsticks are kept there, so a dispute doesn't become a brawl. Where wells are far and deep, underground galleries bring water. Where sand is treacherous, embankments and stake markers keep the trail visible under drift. Passes have small huts for watchmen who observe weather and send word down whether to release caravans today. At city gates sit customs collectors, and nearby stand those who know local cloth measures and silver weights and can convert foreign measures fairly. Every road is also a timetable. On plains in summer, you travel at night and dawn. In the desert, you must know which day brings guaranteed water. In the mountains, you must catch a thaw and avoid avalanche hours. At sea, all obey wind and current. The captain and pilot hold the monsoon calendar in their heads and keep alternate havens for bad weather. The same timetable makes hubs breathe. When high passes sleep in winter, lower corridors fill. In shoulder seasons, market prices swing wider. In high season, extra fares pop up to relieve the main squares. There is no eternal capital of the road. In one age, Dunhuang holds centrality because routes cross there and texts pile up in accessible languages. In another, Samarkand or Merv takes the palm because rulers keep order on approaches and insurance is cheaper. Baghdad can become for decades a power strip of money and books, then vanish from itineraries within a generation, forcing networks to re-sew their pattern. Flexibility is the norm. Cities do not only rise and fall, they learn from each other's tools, how to organize storage, run quality control, and make strangers feel local within the market's bounds. There is a subtler geography too, the geography of water and fuel. A caravan needs water for people, salt for stock, fodder and fuel, wood or dung. Hence a route zigzags. Better to detour to a reliable well than save a few hours and stall dry. At sea, the same logic holds. The shortest line is unsafe if a storm front blocks access to the next haven. A captain chooses a route with a ladder of stops, even if it lengthens the passage. Why do maps show threads around the Taklamakan rather than across it? Not for romance, but because the desert's core is a field of shifting sands and salt flats with wells too sparse to trust. Oases on the edges are like beads on two strings, north and south. Each string has specializations. More places in the north for fixing carts and forging iron. More places in the south for loading stone, pigments, and raw materials. Between them run faint tracks, known only to local guides, and that knowledge is a currency no worse than silver. From mountains to plains, the rules change again. On the Iranian plateau, the road straightens, but attention cannot slacken. Salty winds dehydrate people and animals. Seasonal watercourses fill and empty without warning. Dust storms knock you down. Watch posts and distance markers matter here, with signs to the next water and the nearest lodging. On long, flat sections, paired caravans pay. two columns that can split, one peeling off to a nearer market, while the other keeps the long haul. On the western end, the overland strands spread into several tails. One leads to Mesopotamia and on to Syrian cities, Aleppo, Damascus. Another trends to the Persian Gulf and its ports, where cargo sensibly meets ships. A third holds north toward Anatolia and the Black Sea. Which tale dominates depends on the political frontier and where customs can be collected without destroying trade. A frontier is not only a wall and enmity. In a good configuration, it is a filter with a reasonable tariff. Charge fairly, and the flow continues. Overreach, and it shifts to the second tail. Two principles let the corridor system survive: duplication and modularity. Duplication means a route has a parallel in case of trouble. Modularity means a load can be split among different paths and recombined at a hub. These principles cut across sea and land alike. If the Strait of Malacca is unsettled, part of the traffic hugs alternate straits and coasts with frequent landfalls. If the Hormuz zone is closed by war, the Khorasan-Iraq overland trunk takes more weight and hands it off to the Levant. This is what road means in our narrative, not a line, but a habit of interlacing. Within this geography live quiet heroes. A well dug at the right interval and shored properly gives life to dozens of people and hundreds of animals each season. A bridge over a fierce stream saves not hours, but lives. A chalked note on a caravanserai wall, storm in 2 days wait, saves not only cargo but the nerves of the caravan master, on which the next deal rests. Big roads are built of small deeds, rules shared with neighbors, and tricks tested on the spot. A key effect of this geography of duplication is economic agility in hubs. A city that can quickly reroute traffic around a closure survives. A city that pulls the blanket to itself at all costs loses trust. Thus, reputations form, the invisible customs gate. Reputation is not only a legend of hospitality, it is a merchant's calm that the yard weight will not be lighter than yesterday, that the tariff will not change overnight, that letters of guarantee will be honored next door. A geography where cities compete in orderliness breeds roads that can take a hit. Behind the scenes lies one more map, the map of the cost of distance. It changes even when mountains and deserts do not. A new well opens, and the path cheapens. A roadbed improves, and carts run 2 weeks faster. A guard post is strengthened, and the insurance slice of the budget shrinks. The cost of distance is what a caravan master weighs in choosing whether to send porcelain by sea or land, to push silk through the northern corridor, or hold it till spring and send it south. You can compute it, but there is always a touch of art. That art, passed from elders to juniors, makes the Silk Road not just a space but a profession. The landscape of routes looks different in different centuries, but its grammar stays the same. Corridor, hub corridor, well-halt market, pass, window, regrouping. When that grammar is observed, the road becomes a habit. Habit breeds memory. Memory breeds trust. Trust converts into money, books, and new skills. Geography stops being a backdrop and becomes an engine that explains why the network holds, even when maps cast over it, the shadows of war and epidemic. Third, the rhythm of booms and slumps, from Han to the horde of roads. The history of the Silk Road reads like breathing. Inhalations, when the network expands and quickens exchanges, and exhalations, when corridors thin, hubs empty, and long-distance trade searches for detours. It is vital to see not only dates, but the logic of cycles. Upturns arrive when several large conditions coincide. There is a political frame, roads are protected, customs are predictable, and key cities are skilled at redistributing flows. Downturns strike when one link breaks and drags the rest. Frontier war, epidemic, the wrecking of a hub, wells running low, security becoming dearer. The network does not collapse. It redraws its pattern. Some cargo goes by sea, some along step bypasses, and some branches idle until conditions improve. An early rise is associated with late Han in the east and the Kushan world in Central Asia. In that pairing, steady corridors formed through the Tarim oases and Pamir passes. From the east traveled raw materials and finished goods, paper and textiles. From the west, glass and stone, aromatics and spices. Parthia, and later the Sasanians on the Iranian plateau, stabilized the western overland segment. They maintained roads and took a reasonable rent from the flow rather than trying to swallow it whole. Oasis towns on the southern and northern rims of the Taklamakan grew larger, stronger, wealthier. Workshops and merchants' courts multiplied in their quarters. Written traces from this era often note interpreters, notaries, customs men, and warehouse overseers' signs that trade had become daily work rather than a rare adventure. A crucial detail of the early upturn is the rhythm of the passes. When caravan calendars are tuned to seasonal windows in the Pamirs and the Hindu Kush, the road shifts from luck to schedule. Guides learn snow and stone where to shelter, where to split a caravan into two streams so as not to overload a trail. Meanwhile, towns on the plateau and in Iran concentrate accounting skills. Standard weights, yardsticks for cloth, and silver by weight sit at markets and customs posts. A desk with seals and oaths serves both locals and strangers. Predictability is born, and predictability fuels long routes. The rise strengthens under the tongue. This is a time when eastern corridors often feel more secure, and Dunhuang and its neighbors act as editors, not only of goods, but of texts. In the Mogao caves, scribes copy and translate. At the Yumen, Jade. Gate, officials issue passes and levy duties. On the squares, caravans are logged. In monasteries, merchants and scribes find a roof. Sogdian networks in Central Asia, Uyghur intermediaries on the steppe, and the urban elites of Samarkand and Bukhara hold the rhythm together. Translation centers are lively an indicator, as telling as any commodity list. Texts signal that people have enough spare time and means not only to live off the road, but to keep its memory. On the western side, Sasanians and later the Abbasids frame the system. Baghdad becomes a power strip where money, texts, and skills converge. The city draws glass and metal workers, physicians and translators, and sends back edited knowledge. For merchants, this means two practical advantages: deeper demand for quality goods and a denser mesh of credit and guarantees. Banking houses sense the market and advance loans against goods. Promissory notes and letters allow traders to avoid hauling too much silver over long distances. In such a configuration, caravans move not in isolated spurts, but in sequences, and the cost of distance falls through scale effects. Every good stretch alternates with error correction. In the Tarim valleys and on China's western marches, wars for influence flare more than once. In one period, Tibet exerts pressure on passes and oases along the desert's southern rim. In another, the Arab-Byzantine frontier becomes a filter with an elevated price. On such borders, safe passage is costlier, insurance thicker, interpreters and middlemen anything but a formality. Another telltale sign is the frequency and weight of fares. In calm years, fares multiply and lengthen. In tense years, they compress into brief flares, and cities proceed with caution, waiting for clarity. The next powerful inhale is the age of Mongol consolidation. When steppe and desert corridors fall under a single hand, not only armies, but ordinary letters, orders, and notes speed up. Postal stations, safe conducts, guards on critical stretches, transit privileges formalized in charters. All this sharply raises predictability. The steppe, once an unpredictable neighbor, becomes a sponsor of speed. Long-haul transport grows more reliable, hub deals more transparent, and the remarking between long and short routes proceeds faster. Cities learn to bundle consignments from different corridors and then unravel them where prices or shipping options are best. Under the Pax Mongolica, accelerated exchange shows in people as much as in goods. Numbers of artisans and masters moved between hubs grow. Some travel by invitation, others by order, others by rumor of work and good prices. With them, travel family ties and trusted agents who cement distant deals and ensure risks. If in prior centuries a translator in an oasis was a rare specialty, now the translator scribe becomes as ordinary as the market's weight checker. Paper and printing gain a second wind. Handbooks and notebooks multiply in hubs. Not luxuries, but tools. But every inhale has a limit, and exhalations follow. Resources of hordes are finite. Overlapping wars that demand attention in several theaters, long sieges in Central Asia and Iran, and climactic blows like the catastrophe at Merv or the fall of Baghdad in the 13th century. Each such strike erases more than a point. It tears the familiar threads by which documents, debts, and guarantees are recognized. A trader reasons simply. He will go where customs can be paid fairly and quickly. He will avoid places where he cannot be sure his note will be honored. The network does not disappear. It shifts to the sea, strengthens step bypasses, or withdraws into local circuits until the sky clears. Another layer, epidemics and climate. The 14th century brings the Black Death, a blow not only to people but to schedules. Where handlers and drovers die, labor grows dear. Where monasteries and inns close, safe halts thin. Where authorities sound alarms, unpredictability rises. In these centuries, climate shifts alter snow and rain calendars. Pass windows slide. Drought lingers longer in deserts. Caravans grow cautious, carry less, move slower, ensure consignments, and split cargo to avoid losing all at once. In such years, the maritime branch often looks steadier. Monsoon calendars are tighter, and ports are better suited to quarantines. The tilt to the sea is not a single decision, but the sum of many. When land time and again charges a premium for risk, big consignments go oceanic. Heavy, bulky goods, porcelain, sugar, spices, timber are easier to ship by water on large hulls and then break down in guarded ports. Land does not empty. It becomes more regional, taking on what works on shorter legs, tying oases to ports, fine-tuning assortments to local demand, and delivering inward. It is not abandonment. It is a redeployment of functions. There are indicators by which one can eyeball rise and decline even without dates. First, the density of caravanserais and the regularity of their service. When courtyards are open in season, when they hold water and fodder reserves, when fresh road notes appear on their walls at nightfall, the network is alive. Second, custom stability. Where levies are fixed and transparent, and disputes are settled on the spot by a known procedure, merchants have fewer reasons to go dark. Third, the activity of translation centers and schools. A city that translates, copies, stores, texts, heals, and teaches is investing surplus into long-term goods. Fourth, the presence of long merchant houses that span generations. 3 or 4 generational turns under one roof are the best sign of stability. Every upturn brings its own centrality. In one set of decades, Dunhuang rises as gate and scriptorium. In another, Samarkand as workshop and editor of consignments. In a third, Baghdad as a node, where money, books, and craft converge and disperse. Centers change, but the system holds as long as a simple formula is met. Guarded roads, intelligible documents, moderate tariffs, hubs with competencies. When one component fails, the game changes. War can make yesterday's center prohibitive. Then a parallel branch instantly gains value, and a neighbor city gets its chance. One node's slump is another's opportunity, which in the long run keeps the network flexible. During exhale periods, the weight of small decisions becomes most visible. A city that, in a hard year, lowers levies, avoids squeezing guests, and warns ahead of road risks, preserves reputation, and captures buyers when the wave recedes. A city that tries to offset risk with momentary profit overcharging and playing games with measures and weights, loses flow and enters a vicious circle. A merchant's memory outlasts a political campaign and is hard to overwrite. Hence the Chronicle's stock phrases about just measure and proper duty. Not ornaments, but working tools. With every inhale and exhale, the texture of the assortment changes. In upturns, the share of expensive and fragile goods grows. Finer glass, more complex dyes, thinner textiles, exclusive patterns and forms. In slumps, the portfolio turns heavier and more utilitarian. Ware that can sit in storage and will surely sell. Stout ceramics, timber, common fabrics, salt, short-haul grain. It is not a law of iron, but a trend legible to all who live off the road merchant, artisan, storeman alike. Political borders have two faces. At their best, a border is a filter through which people and goods pass by a reasonable procedure. At their worst, it is a wall where time and money are lost. The Silk Road saw both. Where states had working treaties on customs and guest protection, roads came alive. Where treaties were absent or ignored, the flow shifted to the second plan. Often, a frontier town acting as mediator could suffice. Its archives held oath templates recognized by both sides. Such towns stitched legal regimes together and took a commission for it. The road preferred these locks above all. Speed at the border was worth the fee. The steppe deserves separate attention. In some eras, steppe confederations behaved as partners, protecting transit and taking payment as a service. In others, they preferred predation and strikes at hubs. The outcomes for the network are opposite. With a partner steppe, long-haul itineraries lengthen, security costs fall, and merchants confidently combine larger consignments for high passes. With a hostile steppe, the road fragments, cities stock up on short runs and warehouse credit. If there is a maritime alternative, flow tilts seaward faster. If there is not, insurance devices rise in price, deposits, guarantees, extra escorts. The steppe is never mere backdrop, it is an actor. Two compasses guide this chronology. One is material: roads, wells, caravanserais, guards, documents, tariffs. The other is human: the reputations of hubs and houses, habits of cooperation, languages and schools. When both compasses point in the same direction, the network widens. When they diverge, workaround schemes take over, and somewhere in the text, the word expensive appears. So it was with late Han and the Kushans, under the Tang, under the horde of roads, and in times of decline when anchors clanged in the Indian Ocean while caravans waited at passes. This breathing suggests a calm conclusion. Flourishing is not decorative luxury or random luck. It is the successful synchronization of three basics. Water, so that there are oases and ports for replenishment. Road, so that there is a way to go and stations along it. Text, so that terms are known and recognized. When those three align, even distant strangers become predictable partners. When anyone fails, the rest spend energy compensating. Then the network either shrinks to local circles or changes medium by raising the share of sea legs. This chronology is not dates for date's sake. It explains why some generations saw caravans as part of the landscape and others as exceptions. In some decades, Dunhuang breathes with scriptoria, Samarkand with fresh enamel and glass, Baghdad with books and a market of ideas. In others, the dusty road lies empty, and people shift to the shore, to wind and sail. Yet even then, a handful of overland hubs do not close. They keep ledgers, guard yard weights, record oaths, and maintain wells. That inertia provides the seed of the next inhalation when political and natural conditions again align. Gathering the strands, the pattern looks thus: an early rise from late Han and the Kushans to steady Pamir corridors, high density in the Tang era, with active Sogdian Uyghur networks and Sasanian or Abbasid frames in the west, consolidation under the Pax Mongolica, with accelerated post and guarded transit, declines from border wars, blows against hubs, epidemics, and climate, a tilt to the sea, slow but decisive moving heavy consignments to the ocean and redeploying overland roles. Indicators: caravans arise, customs stability, translation centers, and long-lived merchant houses. On such a metronome, the rest of the story sits without rattle. We see when the network dared, when it hedged, and why it always found a way to continue. Prévu: actors and institutions, power, middlemen, law, and the finance of the road. The Silk Road's resilience always rested on specific people and the rules they acknowledged. Outwardly, we see caravans, city gates, and sea harbors. Inside, an institutional machine did the real work: safe conducts, standard weights, contracts, promissory notes, oaths, diasporas, and the caravanserai as a service combine. Without this unseen layer, long-distance trade would quickly dissolve into a chain of accidents. Let us see who exactly kept the road operational, how they made agreements, and how they cut risk. Empires gave the road its frame. Their contribution sounds dry: garrisons, roads, customs, but it is what turned space from chaos into timetable. Garrisons ensured that tax collectors did not innovate locally, and that attacks on caravans drew a response. Road services stood watch on passes, cleared snow, and set up stakes so the trail would not vanish. Customs converted risk into a forecastable expense. A merchant knew what he would pay at the gate and could budget for it. In calm epochs, authorities issued safe conducts, letters to the next station's chief stating that the bearer travels on legitimate business and under protection. To a merchant, such a sheet was worth a good escort. To the state, it saved on soldiers by substituting procedure for brute force. The longer the route, the more valuable predictability became. Yet empires could not and should not control everything. Ground-level work fell to oasis towns and port pairs. These were the editors of flows. Here, consignments were unbundled and reassembled, measured, sorted, stored, and crewed. Here, paperwork was drawn. Each hub hosted a stable cast of professions: measurers, weighers, assayers of silver, interpreters, scribes, notaries, textile and glass graders, veterinarians, harness makers. They turned a heterogeneous stream into intelligible units. So many cubits of such and such weave. So many vessels of such and such volume. For this, they needed standards yardsticks and weights held at the market and at the gate. These were shown openly to quench disputes before they reached a judge. Where standards were common to all, trust thickened. Where every party pulled its own yard, the road detoured around the town. Above the towns lay the diaspora's family networks of merchants and artisans. They linked hubs with little bridges carrying credit, information, and reputation. A family with members in 3 or 4 cities along a line could issue guarantees, park goods in a house of our own, settle payment without hauling metal, advise on the cost of distance this spring. In practice, a trader at the gate received a letter to a partner at the next hub. The partner took on the obligation to pay once the goods sold. The family back home received funds on the spot through offsetting accounts among houses. Thus, both bandit and venal official were outflanked. Money moved on paper, goods on the ground, and silver rarely crossed the riskiest segments. Sogdian, Persian, Arab, Indian, and Jewish houses, each with 2 or 3 generations of memory, made the road recognizable, even where language and power shifted sharply. A separate class of actors were the nomadic confederations. They were not by nature enemies of the road. On long, empty stretches without walls and bridges, nomads provided security, mounted patrols, guides, packaged escort services. When a confederation was trade-oriented, a merchant received a receipt, paid, protected, and the alliance, steady revenue, and the city's respect. Under predatory models, everything soured. Customs became tribute, escort, extortion. Then one no longer bought a service, but the right not to be robbed. And flow moved to alternate branches. History preserves both scripts, and the road answered quickly. Route changed, caravan composition changed, and the share of goods worth hauling changed. The caravanserai was the base institution of everyday life. Not just a courtyard behind a wall, it was a service bundle. Water, fodder, roof, gear, repairs. A forge, a corner for a scribe and notary to draw a promissory note or record an oath, lockable storage, a stall for a veterinarian. Standard yardsticks and weights were kept on hand. The walls bore notices. Such and such pass closed until thaw. Yesterday, a caravan arrived from the East Winds Fair. The guard post at such and such ford levies at the old rate. Good caravanserais became small markets. The brushmaker mended brooms. The binder repaired notebooks. The weaver sold rough cloth cut to width for re-strapping bales. For people, it doubled as a post office. Letters, order lists, and notes went forward with a reliable caravan. Not always the fastest, but the careful one. The law of the road was woven from urban custom, imperial decrees, and religious formulas. Court meant more than a seated man. It meant a space with a known sequence of acts. Contracts were read aloud. Witnesses made their marks. A seal rolled on clay or bit into wax. An oath was sworn by a sacred thing, so that breach felt not only like cheating a partner, but like breaking the world's order. In Western hubs, Islamic legal forms actively shaped commerce and charity. They secured property rights, shares, and endowments that kept roads and bridges in repair. On Eastern legs, oaths and ritual formulas looked different, but served the same end, making the word heavy enough not to blow away. Old habit. The farther the road, the greater the weight of a document. The finance of the road bridged goods and time. Pure metal in a sack is ill-suited to long hauls. Heavy, conspicuous, dangerous. Traders therefore leaned on silver by weight in local settlements and on paper devices, promissory notes, and letters of guarantee to be honored at the next hub. On maritime legs, port bankers added accounts, present a paper, receive cash or credit against cargo, and settle when the shipment reaches its consignee. Internally, mixed settlement was normal. Part in kind, grain, oil, cloth, part in silver, part in future service, escort, storage, unloading. Debt stretched time and shrank risk. Payment traveled on paper. Hence the premium on trust and reputation. Paper was honored wherever the issuing house was believed. Risk fell by splitting. Rather than send one great load, Merchants spread a consignment across several paths, some via the northern corridor, some via the southern, some by sea. Loss of one thread would not kill the deal. Within a single caravan, shares governed liability. Each participant contributed to escort, guides and doctors, fodder and spare tackle. In case of attack or loss, rules set in advance who lost how much. This did not make the journey safe, but it turned catastrophe into an absorbable loss. The more formal the share scheme, the more readily new people joined it. Interpreters and scribes were the ligaments. You cannot trade across 1,000 miles if parties do not literally understand one another. Key hubs employed people literate in 2 or 3 languages and in the legal formulas of local law. They reduced what a merchant said in the bazaar to one document. Cloth of such and such weave, glass of such and such quality, delivery by such and such date, penalty for delay. A scribe's error could cost more than a handler's one bad figure guaranteed a dispute a month later in another town. Good scribes were known by name and carried an invisible quality mark. His papers are straight. A news service was part of security. A merchant prized not just a wall around a yard, but fresh information. Is the pass closed? What is the ferry duty? Has war flared? What are escort rates? Couriers were not the only carriers of news. Monasteries, markets, inns, and city gates broadcast in short notes and seal-stamped announcements. There were no newspapers, but everyone knew which walls to read with their eyes. The clearer a space communicated, the fewer reasons there were for panic, and the cheaper insurance became. A vital strand of the institutional fabric was the habit of the honest measure. It sounds moral, but it worked technical. Yard weights lay in plain view during bargaining. Quality control was public. A cloth edge to the light, a vessel rim to the ring, grain to the palm, to spotted mixture. If cheating was caught, penalties were not only monetary. A town known for light weights lost traffic. Reputation behaved like an invisible toll booth. If they will not believe you, they will not call. Authorities and markets understood this, so honest measure was profitable, not merely virtuous. The road constantly ran into borders. Good border configurations meant rules acknowledged by both sides and quick resolution on the spot. Bad ones meant fluctuating tariffs, officials stronger than paper, and seals appealable only through the capital. Mediators helped. Frontier towns with template oaths recognized by both regimes. They stitched legal orders together and charged a fee. The road preferred such locks. Speed at the line was worth the commission. Viewed in motion, institutions outlasted political swings. Rulers changed. Caravanserais stayed where they had always made sense. City archives were renamed. Standard weights kept serving. Diasporas changed the language of letters, but preserved the architecture of guarantees. A new regime issued its safe conduct, and soon learned to honor older forms, because otherwise trade grew dear. Repetition gave institutions strength. If something works by itself year after year, power hesitates to break it and tries to plug in. Finance grew more intricate while remaining transparent to participants. Partnerships between a silent investor and a managing partner were common when put in goods or silver. The other ran the caravan and sales. Profits were split by formula. This let people with money join the trade without personal risk, and people with road knowledge earn without large capital. House networks stabilized such schemes. A bad run did not zero out a relationship if the house's overall behavior was reliable. Below the radar lived small but systemic practices. Towns kept samples of textiles, dyes, and glass to settle disputes at once. On corridor junctions there were measure translators, people who knew how to convert one city's cubit into another's yard. a suk into an arshin, a kir into a seer. Caravans had leads for water, fodder, and human and animal care. Ships had leads for rigging repairs, navigation, and freshwater procurement. Each owned a budget line, and all participants could read the budget so that every halt did not become an argument. Religious institutions were not decorative above the road. They were part of service. Monasteries, temples, and zawayas along the routes offered lodging and food, issued guarantees, and validated oaths. Endowments funded wells and bridges. Communities made sure their providers. Merchants could travel and return. This was not pure altruism. The road fed cities. Cities fed the road. Circular responsibility generated resilience. Everyone could see their direct gain in neighbors being provisioned and the road in repair. Drawn as a profile, the trunk shows a clean division of roles. The empire holds the frame, the city edits the flow. Diasporas stitch hubs, nomads ensure empty stretches. The caravanserai services everyday needs. Interpreter and scribe make the word heavy. Standard weights simplify disputes. Financial papers stretch time and lessen risk. On that chassis, trade shifts from adventure to craft. Then the system grows a long memory. Children learn not only the road, but the paper from their elders. Cities accumulate habits no less than canals. Yard weights pass as market heirlooms from generation to generation. Another reason for durability was modularity. Any hub could plug in if it quickly mastered the basics. Honest measure, intelligible tariff, a place for storage, people for writing and translation, compacts with neighbors. This explains why the network survived major shocks. One center fell. A neighbor assumed its role because the tools were known and replicable. In this sense, the Silk Road was less a geography than a transferable set of competencies. Finally, money and the cost of distance. The merchant constantly balanced three numbers: the price there, the price here, and the price of the road between. Institutions pushed the third down through escort, timetables, clear documents, reasonable customs, and credit. Each notch lowered made new there-here pairs viable. Thus rose goods once not worth carrying far: fragile glass, thin textiles, rare dyes, complex books. When the cost of distance rose, war, epidemic, greedy border, the portfolio grew heavier and coarser, and ranges shrank. Here you can feel the road's weather. It is measured not only by wind and rain, but by institutional quality. In sum, this is not a heroic epic, but a technology of joint survival. The road joined not only places, but habits. The more people shared the habits, writing and reading, measuring and weighing fairly, swearing and performing, the more geography allowed. It sounds simple, but on such simplicity, centuries of exchange rested. It is what we recognize across eras. Names of powers change, languages of seals change, forms of notes change, but the logic holds. That logic made the Silk Road what it was and remains in memory. Not a track in sand, but a working agreement among very different people on how to live far apart. V. The economy of things and the practice of logistics. Goods, packing, the caravan budget. The Silk Road rests not only on maps and oaths, it has a working anatomy. What exactly is carried, in what it is carried, who bears it, how expenses are counted, where goods are warehoused, when they are sold, and how the road is insured. Take the anatomy apart, and it becomes clear why long-distance trade yields profit, not by accident, but by a carefully tuned budget. Begin with the portfolio. Silk is only the shop sign. A single caravan moves dozens of lines, each with its own price, bulk, temper on the road, and selling horizon. East, west goes fine cloth, raw and spun silk, paper in sheets and rolls, lacquerware, porcelain, worked bronze, compressed tea. West, east goes glass and polychrome enamels from Syrian and Iranian shops, semi-precious stones, dyes, Indian indigo, Iranian madder, rarer yellows and purples, Arabian aromatics, spices from India and Southeast Asia, high-grade horses from steppe valleys, fine wools, wax, metals, and timber, utilitarian freight salt, grain, oil. Leather circulates as well, but usually on shorter legs. It is cheaper to feed a neighboring region than to haul a jar of oil over passes. Each good has a personal cost of distance, made of 4 traits: fragility, volume, weight, and time to sail. Porcelain is dear but brittle. Glass is even more temperamental. Silk is light and valuable, which gives top margin per unit of weight. Paper is light but bulky and must be tightly packed. Dyes are compact and expensive, and therefore love the longest hauls. Grain is heavy and cheap short range. Salt is heavy and indispensable better on short runs. In the caravan budget, this reduces to a simple rule. Long legs carry light, high-value lines. Middle legs take what holds price and resists shock. Short legs take everything that turns fast. A portfolio is balanced like an investor's basket. A slice for super premium, a slice for workhorse, a slice for insurance. Super premium covers very fine silk, rare enamels, rare dyes, porcelain shapes fashionable this season. The workhorse layer carries mid-range fabrics, ordinary porcelain, common spices, simpler glass. Insurance is what sells in any town and stores well. Salt, stout ceramics, good leather, basic utensils. Thus the risk of freezing with unsellable stock if the road stretches out is cut. Next layer, packing and containers. Without proper packing, a caravan becomes a column of losses. Textiles and paper are compressed into bales, wrapped in coarse cloth and rope with liners against moisture. Costly fabrics get an extra cover, so dust and sun do not bite the dye. Porcelain and glass ride in baskets, and chests with straw, reed, or old cloth padding. Where shape allows, pieces stand on edge, so an impact hits the strong rim. Dyes and spices go in leather sacks and crates. Sacks carry tags with weight and name to avoid quarrels at transshipment. Oils and syrups ride in ceramic jars or small casks. Jars are pitched on seams. Casks are hooped with iron. Lacquerware and other soft wares live in an inner case, safe from abrasion. Containers are more than armor. They are units of account. Trade runs smoother when a basket of such and such type implies about so many liters, and a bale of such and such height implies about so many cubits of cloth. Having a literage and a standard tear reduces recounts at halts and narrows the room for cheating. Hence, hubs love their local container forms, and newcomers adapt. In City A, baskets in standard diameters abound. In City B, bale sleeves of coarse cloth in set sizes. Repair shops at hubs keep containers in working order. Stitch straps, square a lid, replace a bent slat, reinforce corners. The craft of tying a bale with a correct knot matters as much as a handler's strength. One good tie saves the load on a steep descent. A caravan's composition is people, animals, and functions. At its core are the owner or a managing partner, responsible for the budget and deadlines, a head drover, pace, water, and fodder, guides, paths, wells, speech, security, light by default, reinforced on risky stretches, a scribe and interpreter, sometimes one person, a farrier vet on medic, and a cook. Animals, camels for desert legs, horses and mules in the mountains, yaks higher up, at times oxen for wheeled sections on plains. Big consignments are divided into strings of roughly 20-40 head each, with a foreman per string. That simplifies formation on narrow ledges and inventory at halts. The budget starts long before departure. Part of the containers are bought in advance. Staff are hired. Storage at destination is arranged. Sometimes escort is pre-booked through an agent. The budget splits into hard and soft. Hard, purchase of goods, packing, wages for the guaranteed minimum number of days, customs at compulsory gates, lodging at pre-chosen caravanserais, reserves for water and fodder. Soft, variables, extra days due to delays, ad hoc escort, gear repairs, small ransoms in minor incidents, brokerage, premiums for fast unloading, loading. For truly long legs, a 10-20% reserve beyond the planned time is set aside, especially where pass weather is fickle. Pay is tiered. Guides and head drovers earn higher rates and a cut of the premium. The scribe / interpreter is paid above average. An error on paper costs more than an extra sack of fodder. Guards get a fixed fee with a bonus for a clean run. The farrier, vet, and cook are not luxuries. Animals are capital. Hot food preserves human strength. For some specialists, interpreter, scribe, local guide piecework rules, hub to hub, with certain pay and the right to take the next contract. Fodder, water, and salt supplements are their own budget lines. Camels drink rarely but fare poorly on ice and slick descent. Horses drink more but are surer on narrow ledges. Yaks are irreplaceable above a line. You cannot map count fodder, only daily consumption and reserves for black days' work. Water is the limiting factor. Better to detour to a sure source than gamble. Salt for stock is obligatory on hot runs. It is health, hence draft safety. The cook builds a ration that keeps strength. Early start and hot porridge at dawn save time and temper. Customs and tolls are predictable but painful. In clean years, rates are fixed and posted at the gate. In bad years, a band is enforced, and an intermediary or a letter from the authorities is worth more. A trader will prefer clarity. Better to pay a known rate 4 times than save 3 times and lose more at the 4th gate in confusion. Where mixed duties, silver and in kind, apply, it pays to carry universal items for pledge standard fabrics, oil, grain that move quickly in local markets. Ports have their own stack, wharfage, warehouse fee, transshipment to river, pilotage. The budget is fatter, but so are volumes. Warehouses and fairs bridge time and money. Storage lets you wait for the right season. Sell porcelain at a festival. Release cloth when the buyer arrives from his market. Hold for a partner caravan to combine consignments. Storage costs, monthly rent, and steward service. But the loss from the wrong season can be higher. Fairs are accelerators, short bursts that gather demand from the countryside and let you skim. Rule 1. Do not tarry without cause. Goods earn while moving. A quiet month eats margin. Hence, warehouse credit exists. Good stock gets money in advance, so the caravan does not stand idle. Risk and hedging read like an insurance policy. Main risks: loss on a hazardous stretch, brigandage, sudden war, epidemic that shuts a hub, climate surprises, snow, sandstorm, wells running low. Each has an answer. Loss is softened by splitting and share rules among participants, brigandage by hired escort, and safe windows, war by letters from authorities, and detours via a parallel branch, epidemics by a halt and sail through local partners if the road truly closes, climate by more time and spare kit. In the ledger, these look like extra expenses, but they make profit stable. A cheap run can randomly bring more, but a business lives on more than one run. Information is a resource. A caravan carries the road's newspaper, current prices at nearby hubs, customs rates at the next gate, a rumor of a repaired bridge relayed by a chain of caravanserais, pass opening expectations. The chief keeps a notebook. Water on day 3 at the Acacia. On the descent from the pass, the left ridge is unsafe. At these gates, they levy at the old rate. At the next, new. Such trifles save weeks. A carrier who knows where to drop escort to avoid paying twice and where to take it for sure counts margin better. Not all goods stomach the road equally. Thin silk fears damp and rides on top under covers. Paper survives by dense binding and fast, shady halts. Lacquerware dislikes heat pack in the bale's middle. Keep cool in the yard. Porcelain lives with jolts if packed right and dies from one wrong blow. Glass demands a polite caravan. The chief picks trails with less shudder. Live stock horses, young animals has its regime. Fodder, water, vet, careful bridge work. Hence, each caravan has its own route and speed. No universal track suits everything. Repacking is a hub art. Samarkand reties bales. Bukhara fits baskets. Merv and Rai choose new casks. Not busy work, but adaptation to the next leg. From desert to mountains, a different lash. From mountains to plains, new carts. Smart repacking is lost control. A hub that does it fast and cheap draws traffic. Quality checks belong here too. Break a seal. See if a cover breathed, whether paper dampened, whether dye bled. If there's a problem, fix it now. Otherwise, it will exact a price at the next market. Logistics has a daily rhythm. In the desert, you move at night and early morning. Noon is shade and sleep. In the mountains, you start before sunrise to crest by noon. On plains, you stretch the day, using evening cool. At sea, sails run by wind calendars and anchor in sheltered coves. Rhythm protects health and cargo. Less jolting, fewer deformations, lower risk of overheating what heat ruins. Economy includes the human factor. Reliable caravan masters are known by name and rehired because they bring things back. A partner house names its scribe the hand is recognizable and accepted next door. A warehouse steward with a reputation means fewer disputes, seals in order, transparent inventory. These people are invisible margin. They do not sit as a line item, they lower the surprise coefficient. In a good year, the budget permits a luxury, an experimental good. It is a bet on a trend, a new ornament type, a fresh vessel shape, a rare dye. If the destination hub likes novelties, the bet pays. In a bad year, the basket is simplified. Guideline: liquid without haggling. What sells always? Fast. That is not poverty of taste. It is a strategy for riding out volatility. Sea and land cooperate pragmatically. Often it pays to split a consignment. A part goes by ocean to Hormuz or Aden. A part goes overland west. You hedge risk and play the season. The sea lot arrives for a port fare. The land lot for an oasis fare. Ports have their own container logic. Amphorae and casks, deck lashings, protection against brine. Fast hands are prized unloading crews that handle fragile goods without fear. You pay for speed. It pays back. Less idle time. Lower carrying costs for people and animals. Caravan bookkeeping is not only incomes and outlays, it is also a memory map. Chiefs' notebooks keep figures and marginalia. Here it pays to buy rope. There is the best iron for hoops. There the yard weights are honest. Here the notary is attentive. Such notes are capital that never sits in a stall, yet works every run. They pass to the next chief, and thus a house outlives a single career. This is intellectual logistics. To the ruler and scale, you add habits and shop secrets. Why does this material side matter so much to our story of the Silk Road? Because it explains durability. Once hubs learned to repair containers, keep standards, and repack quickly. Once caravans learned to plan water, split risk, and write paper long-distance trade became a craft. Craft is portable. You can reopen it in a new place if you have people and will. Hence, the network holds even when war knocks down whole cities. New hubs pick up the tools, and within a year or two the same formulas are heard in their markets, and a familiar road newspaper hangs on their walls. The economy of things is also an ethic: honest measure, quick transshipment, intelligible duty, timely warning. These are not moral ornaments, but parts of the pact. Do not waste another's labor. A caravan values a town that does not make it shift bales twice. A town values a caravan that does not break the bridge or foul the well. Such ethics save resources, which is why they outlast dynasties and fashions. They rest on a plain truth of long roads. Profit arises where someone has already thought about someone else's work. Collect the picture whole, and you see why long-distance trade survived centuries. There was no secret button. There were working practices, proper containers, a smart budget, movement rhythm, careful paperwork, a lattice of warehouses and fairs, a habit of splitting risk, and the ability to change route quickly. When all of these align, a caravan does not rely on luck. It is very likely to arrive. Then, beautiful things, porcelain, cloth, glass stop being marvels and become the expected outcome of thousands of small decisions made on time. 6. Technologies and knowledge: how skills and formats migrate. Goods are easy to spot in a bazaar: bales of cloth, baskets of porcelain, sacks of spice. Skills and knowledge are subtler, yet they explain why, over decades and centuries, goods become finer, colors more fast, books cheaper, and calculations more exact. Technologies do not move by leap, but by convoy, together with masters and apprentices, with tools, samples, and notebooks of recipes. Their road is the same: oases, passes, caravanserais, and ports. In hubs, knowledge settles into schools and workshops, then sets out again, already reshaped. Paper is the prime example of a single material that refits entire professions. Where it becomes cheap and available, correspondence and accounting swell. Ledgers, promissory notes, and travel journals appear. Slate and sand table give way to copybooks. Paper loves standardization. Sheets of familiar sizes, tidy margins, recurring form fields. This standard makes settlement among strangers easier. A receipt of such and such type reads the same in 2 cities. Light yet strong, paper stows tightly, endures dust and distance, thrives in a dry storeroom, and sours in damp. Wherever paper mills rise, schools cluster nearby: binders, inksellers, scribes, teachers of writing, the full chain of the paper economy. Printing gives these sheets multiplicity. Its earliest impact falls not on high learning, but on craft and commerce: pre-printed contract blanks and notes, tables of measures and weights, inexpensive primers and copy sheets for pupils. Any form that needs repetition, from fair announcements to price lists, gains from print. For caravans, this means less time drafting and checking. For cities, a leveling of rules when everyone writes onto the same paper. The printed template equalizes participants. Eloquence matters less than filling the lines correctly. Glass and enamels travel the other way, from Western workshops to Eastern markets and shops. The secret of clarity, color purity, and chemical balance is not one formula, but many small tricks, each tested in fire. Masters exchange samples: tiny vessels, enamel plaques, shards of colored glass. Rims and cuts show how a recipe behaves. Such samples are calling cards of technology. The eye learns to hear the ring of sound glass. The hand knows the edge of a stable composition. When a workshop in a new city can match that ring and sheen, the skill has taken root. Ceramics on the road change recipe as well as pattern. New glazes and pigments extend older techniques. A city market may demand a particular blue. The needed ore may lie far away. Thus emerge long commodity technology chains. Ore and pigment from one region, forming of bodies in another, firing and decoration in a third. In the 14th century, Chinese ceramic repertory fixes the deep cobalt blue, not only an aesthetic choice, but a geography of supply. High-grade cobalt ores from the Iranian plateau made bright blue and white at scale possible. Textiles live by exchange as actively as ceramics. Cloth itself, patterns, weaves, and dye methods travel with merchants and masters. Patterned sheets and swatches move along the road. This is how the motif settles on this thread. This is how this dye holds. This is how the cloth rinses in this water. Markets codify label words for quality that everyone understands. So many threads per width, such and such a hand, how the cloth sits in the palm. Such and such light fastness for the dye. A hub that respects these labels and can check them honestly against a yardstick quickly becomes an ordering floor. Where local players try to redefine familiar terms, argument outruns trade, and traffic drifts away. Dyes are the most concentrated case. Indigo stains deep, but demands correct fiber preparation. Madder gives reliable reds and terracotta. Yellows and purples are rarer, dearer, and ride in small, carefully packed lots. Recipes are not 3 lines, but a disciplined sequence, from water choice to dwell time. Masters bring a forge of small secrets. Dry this plant in shade. Add that powder at low flame. Such details are not folklore garnish. They are process control, legible in the bazaar by the thing itself. The color does not fade nor flow under heat. Metallurgy moves more rarely and heavily, but it transforms much. The best blades, tools, and harness fittings depend not only on ore, but on the right furnace, the right charcoal, temperature, and time. Smiths cast and forge on the edge between over and under heat. The secret is repeatability. Not, we had one good firing, but we get that result every firing. Craft secrets travel with people. People travel through hubs that receive and value them. A fine blade is both a product and an advertisement, like theirs. Techniques for smelting and tempering arose in South Asia and moved west over long arcs, building bridges between ore, fuel, and hands. Agriculture travels as well. New crops move like slow water, finding channels. Viticulture relocates with its tools and varieties. Orchard trees with scions and lore of pruning and watering. Cotton brings not only cloth, but a demanding eye on irrigation, where and how to grow without exhausting soil. Citrus needs wintering. Gardeners teach windbreak and cover. Where new plants land, menus and income shift. In good years, orchards sell for festivals. In bad years, they store value for the next market. Orchards pull in weirs and canals. That means work for people and animals. Navigation and reckoning form the skeleton of the long road. North of deserts lie trails. South of them, seas. Both demand geometry, distance, direction, time. Early itineraries read like tales. So many days, so much water. Then harden into forms with blanks. Space for a mark. Schematic bend. At sea come tables of monsoon and stars, and the habit of taking the sky. Where a given star rises, thither the course. In hubs, such road knowledge cheapens travel like a fair customs rate. Know in advance how many days and where to wait, and you save strength and coin. Account keeping at hubs begins in many languages, but quickly converges on shared forms, not because someone decrees it, but because it works. Lines and contracts look alike, expressions repeat. Metrological vocabularies compress into a pocket lingua franca. Where silver by weight circulates, conversion tables appear. Where coin is used, touchstones and exemplars lie nearby. Interpreters double as accountants, folding diverse habits into one market pocket language. Apprentices learn it not as a foreign tongue, but as a craft. This line is for term. This clause is for force majeure. Schools and translation shops are quiet engines of the road. In oases, scribes copy and translate scripture, medical compendia, weather lore, road diaries. In large cities, they work through what later ages will call scientific, geometry, astronomy, medicine, mechanics. Where a generation has gathered many literate hands and eyes, horizontal projects start. Terms from one language, text architecture from another, problem sets from a third. Content matters, but form matters too. A proven format is easier to accept at the next hub. Numerical ideas ride not in bales, but in heads, yet follow the same corridors. Efficient number writing makes reckoning faster and shorter. Where traders meet a scatter of schools across wide routes, local habits become a shared grammar of commerce. Write place values like this, separate fractions like that. Speed calculation with tables. Handy notebooks of examples outlive their compilers. Pupils copy them. Masters revise them. A few hubs later, they become local norm. Thus, reckoning and script gain the same modularity as packing. Format is portable. Craft. Secrets are not born only by merchants. A monastery or temple is a school in miniature. Roof, food, time, discipline. Workshops can nest there. Guilds of apprentices thrive. They work to market commission, but they also work for themselves. Religious discipline turns craft into a road of correct repetitions. What worked yesterday must work today. In a retail city quarter, fine knowledge easily spills. In a monastery, it is conserved and stabilized. The market receives not a lucky one-off, but a method that will hold. Between hubs travel not only tools, but document forms. When similar contract blanks recur in different cities, people keep to order. New rulers entering old cities rarely rush to rewrite familiar forms. They add their titulature to the header and leave lines and phrases as they were. The temptation not to hinder trade is strong, so knowledge and routines outlast regimes. They remain recognizable to all parties: merchant, collector, judge. Knowledge migration likes critical mass. One master is experience. 10 are a shop. 100 and a couple of schools make a tradition. With such mass, a city becomes a standard generator. Neighbors copy it. Cloth patterns, contract headings, glaze formulas. Conversely, where few masters exist, but orders and imported raw materials are at hand, hybrids are born. Techniques mix because they must. What later readers call style arises from necessity. Road knowledge is not pristine. Myths travel with it. Obscure recipes gather legend. There is a trick known only in such and such place. There is an iron only those men can work. Legend sustains price and brand. Yet the road's deeper meaning is that, secrets or no, general literacy grows. If 10 neighboring hubs already keep honest measure, write intelligible notes, and repair containers, the 11th will not remain wild. By evening, it will learn from its neighbor. This is live standardization grown from shared convenience, not imposed by fiat. Technology hides in small things. A rope properly braided saves more animal and human work than fancy tackle. The bale does not creep on the descent. A measuring scoop, whose edge cannot be shaved, ends an argument. An ink recipe that will not run in heat or bleed on mediocre paper saves a document from suspicion a month down the road. Such trifles are bricks of the larger system. People prize them over pretty stories because they endure and pay every season. What we have here is a slow highway of knowledge. It runs through hubs and branches wherever a school, a market, a workshop, and a sample cabinet coexist. When caravans are many, the highway widens. When few, it does not vanish. Letters, apprentices' trips, and orders by letter suffice. Masters and scribes know how to live on a narrow path. Fewer commissions mean more time to refine techniques, tabulate recipes, and translate foreign texts into local formats. It is the same road, only slower. Why does this invisible logistics matter for understanding the Silk Road? Because it explains longevity. Goods changed. Rulers did too. The tempo of knowledge kept its own beat and constantly made the road cheaper for those who could count. Paper and printing shortened distance for words. Glass, glazes, and ceramics followed the demand for color and convenience. Dyes and cloth trained markets in refined taste and procedural discipline. Metal and orchardry learned repeatability. Reckoning and navigation saved days. Schools and monasteries turned lucky finds into reproducible methods. These are the survival technologies of long-distance commerce. There is no miracle here, only care. Where to place a bale, how to dry paper, what water to draw for a dye, how to close a contract, how to keep accounts. 1,000 local decisions converge on one result. The road becomes habitual, repeatable, and therefore reliable. Thanks to this hidden layer, things stop being distant marvels and become expected guests. If today the road looks like caravans and gates, tomorrow, once we peer into stitched notebooks, the bench of measures, and seals on blanks, we see that the road is also a pact about the form of knowledge and the will to repeat it until it holds. 7. Cultures and faiths, channels of meaning and forms of hybridity. Goods are easy to count, but meanings and customs cannot be measured by a yardstick or weighed on a scale. Yet they explain why exchange between distant people is possible at all. A traveler knows, an oath spoken in the right words works better than brute force. A sign on a monastery gate can substitute for a letter of recommendation. Ornament and inscription on a vessel let one read the thing without a translator. The Silk Road was not only a road of objects, but a road of signs. Religions and schools moved along it. Formulas of greeting and shapes of documents. Musical motifs and patterns. At the crossroads, these streams produced hybrids. Stable combinations of difference to which people soon grew accustomed. Buddhism understood the power of the road early. Monasteries in the oases played several roles at once: hostel for merchants, library, translation school, quiet arbiter in disputes. A wandering preacher spoke one tongue, a trader another. In the scriptorium their words met in a third, intelligible to both sides. Translation was not a mechanical swap of word for word, but a careful fit of meaning to local habits. A sutra became native when it could be read aloud in the square and understood without a glossary. The murals of cave temples built bridges even faster. The painter chose pigments and techniques familiar to the viewer, then introduced new scenes and figures, and the viewer recognized the foreign as close at hand. In this way, sacred text and image acted as a road map for those who had not yet walked the road. Manichaean and Church of the East, Nestorian communities, kept to their own itineraries, yet used the same logic. Their element was the hub city. Many languages and a constant need for literate hands. There they opened schools, kept correspondence, and ran scriptoria. They did not aim to repaint their surroundings so much as to embed themselves in exchange, providing familiar oath and contract forms, offering their skills in healing and accounting, supporting those who moved from city to city. For the merchant, one thing mattered. When crossing from one town to the next, he entered a recognizable environment of proper words and gestures. To contemporaries, this did not look like religious expansion. It looked like convenience. Where people with books and seals live, life is easier. In Western hubs, Islam became a shared legal language of trade. It offered formulae for contracts, inheritance, silent partnerships, and charitable endowments. These endowments maintained roads and bridges, caravanserais and wells. Piety became infrastructure. For participants in exchange, this meant clear procedures: how to register a relative's share, how to formalize a silent partner, how to protect property in transit. The religious form was not separate from daily life. Lines like "in the name of God" at the top of a document did not erase numbers. They declared to all that the deal fit an order the community recognized. Where such forms were familiar, a newcomer felt at home at the gate. Nomadic confederations brought their own layer to this picture. Their shrines and rituals differed, but the aim was similar: to make border words heavy enough to be believed. On vast, empty stretches without temples or judges, a confederation's banner might serve as shrine, senior officers as judges, enforcing agreed terms. This steppe jurisdiction rivaled the urban one in quality, so long as it was predictable. Merchants quickly sensed stability. If the same greeting formula and the same payment for protection worked season after season, larger consignments could be sent without splitting the caravan. Hub languages sounded like a chorus, yet order arose with little effort. Sogdian and Persian, Turkic vernaculars, Chinese, Sanskrit and the Prakrits, Syriac and Arabic coexisted not as competitors, but as tools. One language for speech, another for writing, a third for prayer. The point was that the interlocutor heard. Marketplace and gate interpreters were not exotic, but everyday professionals. They knew the formulas that smooth friction between strangers: how to name a price without offense, how to ask for a guarantor, how to promise a deadline. Where such middlemen abounded, every tongue could speak the same grammar of a deal. Patterns and inscriptions worked as wordless passports. A craftsperson who placed a known motif and a widely understood formula on a vessel earned credit before a conversation. A line engraved along a platter's rim could say more than a speech: origin, patron, quality expectations. Ornaments repeated schemes legible across regions: braids, stars, palmettes, lotuses, cloud bands. They did not confuse the viewer. They gave competence. He felt he already knew this thing and where it came from. Such traveling motifs left traces not only in aesthetics, but in accounting. Goods with recognizable faces sold faster. Hybridity was not a post hoc label, but a city's normal response to polyphony. Architecture shows this most clearly. A mason knows local stone and traditional bonds, but a client might order a facade otherwise, with an arcade, with light bays of unfamiliar shape, with patterns the client saw yesterday in a neighbor merchant's house. The crew seeks to join old and new. The result is a house where the structure follows local technique, while the decorative register speaks a neighbor's language. The same logic holds in ceramics and miniature painting. Familiar vessel forms wear unfamiliar patterns. Local composition carries another tale. The city learns to hear more than one melody at once. Musical instruments traveled as well. Lutes and their kin changed bodies and stringing, yet preserved a familiar posture and role as song carriers. By one reading, the family of short-necked, round-backed lutes, known in the West, found echoes in Eastern instruments, with a different playing stance, but a similar principle of sound. Archaic images captured this exchange schematically but persistently. a musician holds an instrument locally, while the body and rows recall the foreign. Ensembles in trading towns sounded both distant, plucked strings, and local drums and flutes as a matter of course. Food and scent seem far from high culture, but they turn the foreign into one's own with the least resistance. Spice binds memory faster than text. A baker in a hub takes local dough, adds an imported aroma, and a queue forms at the gate. On feast days, merchants bring not money, but taste. Spice boxes, small flatbreads, sweets with recipes from their places of origin. The kitchen becomes a laboratory of hybridity. People accept novelty more readily when it is edible and joyous. Shared meals are the social lubricant, without which a caravan serai cannot work. Rituals of greeting and hospitality shape behavior no less than laws. A short bow and a hand to the chest, removing shoes, not staring too intently, how to pass a cup, the gesture by which a guest refuses, yet still accepts. Such details save time and nerves. Travelers master them quickly. He need not speak the host's language, but he must respect the host's table and carpet. In turn, the host is obliged to make a stranger familiar through a common ritual: bread and salt, water, a word about the road. These mutual obligations create the sense that the world is not hostile. Written culture tied religion, law, and daily routines. Pupils copied many kinds of text: prayers, recipes, word lists, model contracts, letters home. In cities with libraries attached to sacred sites, tomorrow took easier shape: a predictable calendar, the rhythm of festivals, the schedule of fairs. A festival was not only worship and procession, it was also a surge of shopping and contracting. Fixed dates eased logistics. Sacred and secular life ran side by side, supporting rather than hindering each other. Narratives on walls and in books served as manuals of gesture as much as devotion. Stories of heroes and sages, accounts of journeys, exempla about how to behave at a ferry, how to receive a guest, how to answer injustice. These lodged simple models in memory. A newly plugged-in merchant or artisan learned the repertoire of proper moves from images as confidently as from the clauses of a contract. This made right conduct common property regardless of literacy. Long-distance trade dislikes aggressive missionary rhetoric. It prefers clarity and a shared field of play. Therefore, the religious and cultural institutions that fit the road best chose the form of service: water for travelers, a roof, a place to pray, a library, help in disputes, mediation of oaths. Such practices created an aura of trust. People were readier to accept the teaching of those who helped than of those who demanded. The flip side was suspicion toward anyone who overpriced in the name of faith. Urban memory recorded such behavior quickly. A shrine's reputation had economic consequences. The map of symbols had no single center, but did have high-density nodes. In some centuries, Dunhuang with its caves and scriptoria made the joint life of many forms visible on the surface. In others, Samarkand, where Eastern ornaments and Persian verse stood beside artisans' breakfasts and merchants' talk, and where city walls bore not only decrees, but poetry. In yet others, Baghdad played editor of warring ideas, a place of dispute, translation, and compilation. Smaller nodes contributed more quietly tiny oasis monasteries, coastal towns where quotations in two languages shared a warehouse wall. The system's strength was that every note found a listener. Transitions rarely ran straight. Adapters mediated traffic. Ornament passed through needlework patterns before entering stone and clay. A text moved through oral preaching before becoming a book. An ethical rule went from a scene on a wall into a contract formula. Multiple adapters made the system resilient. If one channel broke, another still carried meaning. For that reason, the cultural highway outlasted regime change more easily than roads and markets did. Conflicts there were, and religious life wasn't always gentle. Some towns closed doors to some communities and opened them to others. Disputes flared over sacred land. Books burned. Even then, the road found cracks. People kept a core of shared practice, honest measure, recognition of guarantors, a diplomacy of hospitality. The market and the road did not live outside of time, but again and again proved that water, bread, and words are tougher than political rage. This is not moralizing. It is a technique of survival. Hybridity shows in writing, too. A single document might open with a formula in one language and set out the contract body in another. Numerals follow signs familiar to the scribe, while proper names stay as they sound. Such mixtures are not sloppiness. They keep each party in a comfort zone. When both sides recognize the document, there are fewer disputes. Scribes preserved lucky formulas and taught them to apprentices. Decades later, a foreign form became domestic. Music and theater, elusive as they are, carried the road's general line. Audiences accept a foreign melody easily if it fits familiar rhythm. Songs sung in markets do not check a motif's passport. Festival ensembles often mixed instruments, and it did not feel exotic. Traders, artisans, and warriors knew their neighbors' repertoires, so in any large company someone could fit a foreign tune to local words. Thus emerged a shared field of meaning into which anyone could step without fear. From music and image, it is a short step to writing on walls and household objects. Inscriptions on ceramics, cloth, doors, and foundation stones built a common sense of time and measure. A formula on a jar could promise quality, name a workshop, or bless a house. People trusted this small epigraphy. They copied it, imitated it, passed it on. When a neighbor city began using similar formulas, it was praise, not theft. Objects spoke one truth. We will be made as we should be, meaning exchange touched practical knowledge too. Tables for the heavens, pocket road calendars, and concise medical collections were copied and carried across steppe and desert. A healer in one hub might use a plant from the next valley and a recipe written far to the west. Astronomical notes simplified the planning of long runs. Such texts stood outside confessional polemics. They served anyone on the road. Rulers of many names recognized their usefulness. No need to argue doctrine if the sky and a patient's pulse confirmed the calculation. Why does this cultural lubricant matter? Because it lowered transaction costs as effectively as bridges and wells did. A shared field of symbols and formulas let strangers make predictable moves. The ability to read, ornament, and set phrases saves minutes that add up to weeks. Hybrid practices create the feeling of home, far from home. In this view, culture is not decoration but a tool. It worked quietly. Without it, the Silk Road could not have borne the density of exchange and would have fallen apart into short local lines. The conclusion is plain. The road stands not on one great meaning, but on many small ones. Shrines and schools, ornaments and formulas, rituals of greeting, and inscriptions on pottery, a contract language common to many, and shared table customs. Together, they made difference work together. From this blend came stable hybrids, a house that joins a local walling technique to a foreign arcade, a textile whose dye recipe belongs to a far valley, a song where neighbors' motifs can be heard. Once a hybrid becomes familiar, it ceases to be foreign and lives as one's own. On such fuel, the long road could be long indeed. 8. Transformations and legacy, from land to sea and the long memory of the road. The network we call the Silk Road rarely snapped overnight. Much more often it changed medium in tempo. In the later medieval centuries, the longest overland legs gradually yielded to oceanic and littoral routes of the Indian Ocean and the southern seas. Steppe security grew less predictable. Key hubs suffered heavy wounds. The price of the long land road rose. The maritime branch, leaning on the monsoon calendar, on ports, and on attentive navigation, took over ever more tonnage above all cargoes that benefit from large hulls and rhythmic seasons. Spices, sugar, ivory, textiles from coastal manufactories, porcelain in big lots. The land did not vanish. It rewrote its specialization. Its role shifted to assembling and breaking down consignments, to medium-distance hauls, to jumpers between ports and inland markets. On this two-medium system, the network lived a long subsequent life. The tilt to the sea was no decree by a single king or house. It ripened out of a sum of factors. Risks piled up on overland corridors. A frontier war dragged on longer than usual. Passes froze more frequently. Customs swung erratically in border cities. A handful of hard blows to hubs' destruction in eastern Iran and Central Asia. Losses of libraries and craft districts reinforced the trend. At sea, the news was mostly good. Charts gained precision, pilots' experience, ships' capacity, and the monsoon timetable knitted more tightly into market calendars. When a caravan master and a captain compared the cost of distance, the sea leg's advantage grew. Land kept functions no other medium could match, delivering consignments into cities no ship could reach, collecting goods from oases and valleys, tailoring assortments to local demand, moving live cargo horses, stock, plants. Hub cities, the editors, also refit themselves. Familiar overland power strips lost part of their long-distance reach, but they did not disappear. They turned into junctions. Here, lots for ports were built. Here, returns from ships were received. Here, prices were argued and money changed. In the east and south, ports that once served as station platforms for ocean runs became independent stages. Merchant houses spread their roles along the line. Some specialized in littoral transit and warehousing, others on land work, a third set on voxel planning of mixed chains. The network did not dissolve into brine. It learned to reckon in two modalities and to treat the choice of route as a parameter, not a dogma. A transitional age laid bare the main point. A road is first of all a set of competencies. Where competencies survive, the network reproduces itself even when the carrier shifts. The caravanserai as an institution might see less traffic, yet its service bundle was hardly obsolete. On land, approaches to ports, it remained irreplaceable. Water, roof, storage, veterinary care, retying of biles, scribes and interpreters, standard weights, sample cabinets of cloth and glass. Port pairs, from the lawns of Malacca to Hormuz and Aden, built their own copies. Quick-hand stevedore crews, bonded warehouses with transparent ledgers, pilots and shipboard clerks, notarial desks, legible to speakers of many tongues. The same habits, honest measure, recognized papers, clear tariffs, the possibility of pledge-kept trust intact. Only the soundscape changed. Instead of a dusty square and a wellhead, keys clanged, ropes creaked, and strings of bell clusters rang at dock gates. The repertoire of goods shifted as well. Ships gladly took heavy and bulky lots, spices, sugar, rice, timber, porcelain, and ceramics at industrial scale. Hand-thrown pottery had a chance to become mass market in new magnitudes. Ports pulled demand for cheap but stout tableware to spill into interior markets. Porcelain in deep blue, perfected in eastern kilns, became a frequent guest at western tables. Glass and metals moved in the opposite direction, also in volume barrels and sheet suit ships better than caravans. Overland caravans concentrated on distant light lines and on fine logistics, costly fabrics, dyes, pharmacological ingredients, samples, recipes, documents, people with needed competencies. Wherever it is useful to carry meaning rather than mass, land remained quicker and more careful. Diasporas adjusted their roles. Houses long anchored in overland hubs opened daughters in ports. Port houses set up pocket offices in oases. Family memory widened. To the familiar links, City A Oasis B Port C, were added sea legs, Port C Haven D Transshipment Depot E. Credits and notes took mixed forms. One house assumed ocean risk, another the land risk, while settlement flowed through a third in a financial center where both paper regimes were recognized. Again, the advantage fell to those who kept clear formats and well-worn templates, paper, that did not frighten an official either in a port or at an oasis gate. Meanwhile, a quiet technological revolution ran through the ledgers. Paper, printing, and model blanks for contracts and notes compacted traffic and meanings. Lists of port dues with update dates appeared. Handbooks of measures put land and maritime units side by side. Interpreters' notebooks carried adapters, not only between languages, but between legal systems. These modest papers saved months. Armed with up-to-date tables and familiar forms, a trader depended less on the goodwill of each collector or judge. In a world with a larger sea share, fast blanks were worth no less than an extra team of sailors. Policy cast its shadows, too. Some seasons brought closures, and bans, states, tightened limits on ocean trade or rewrote rules. Such acts rarely erased the stock of skills. People once taught to live at the land-sea seam found workarounds, reassign roles among ports, delay premium lots, move part of operations to milder jurisdictions, and, above all, keep trust instruments in order. The network did not break when a valve was tightened somewhere. It moved pressure along its branches, using the very practice it had perfected in earlier centuries on overland bypasses. Alternatives became a norm, not an exception. Culture changed stage as well. Ports gathered not only merchants but new choirs, interpreters, sailors, pilots, clerks, artisans relocated from inland. Motifs now ran, not only through gorges and passes, but along quaysides. Hybrid quarters sprang up, where several languages sounded natural, and where houses of worship from different traditions stood on neighboring streets, sharing duties toward travelers. Schools and scriptoria bent toward port demand, a visible rise in wharf price lists, pilot instructions, warehouse guard rules, and tables of recognized weights and measures for coastal trade. The network of meaning still lived. Its beat was simply denser by the sea. Seen in long view, one can watch overland forms resettle into maritime life without losing their sense. The caravanserai became a dockside inn, the yard weight, a standard vessel on the scale table, the road pass, a port permit, the caravanserai notice wall, a board with sailings and storm warnings. Old names could fade, but their work remained. For people, signboard mattered less than the certainty that everything is as it should be. Accounts kept, records made, no wrangling over the basic yard, papers honored. Cities kept the idea of the far in their very fabric. Even where long land legs quieted, objects, words, and music preserved signs of former connectedness. On tables, vessels with foreign silhouettes. In masonry, not local techniques. In name lists, alien roots. In rituals, gestures that had arrived many times by different roads. Schools preserved forms that served under different regimes and in different tongues. Archives hardened into chains. Such and such witness, such and such seal, such and such measure. recognized across a whole sector of the world. On those chains, new routes were built, not necessarily over sand, but always over memory. Memory is the weightiest part of legacy, and it need not be romantic. In some cities, people recalled golden caravans, missing the point that their craft survived thanks to disciplined accounts and honest measure. In others, memory picked up a museum plate and read formulas that still warm a merchant's hand today. A pledge of quality, a workshop name, a date, a blessing. Elsewhere, maps and tales of hard passes turned into parables of persistence rather than manuals for tomorrow's run. Different tones yielded one effect. The network left long traces in guild statutes, in model blanks, in habits of architecture and ornament, in a bias for negotiating before quarreling. There is a shadow side, too. Cities that never recovered, deserts that swallowed oases, streets where those languages no longer sound. None of this cancels the general conclusion. The network taught people to adapt tools to new settings. What survived proved weightier than lists of losses. If scriptoria fell silent here, they spoke elsewhere. If one road dwindled, another became the trunk. If one bundle of habits thinned, another rose from the archives and went back to work. Such is the strength of long exchange. It is bound not by a single plot, but by many practices. What then remains in a reader's hands if we pack this long experience into a kit for understanding? First, the basic triad water, road, text. Water, wells, ports, canals. Road, trails, streets, harbors. Text, contracts, passes, schedules. Where this triad aligns, long-distance deals are possible and profitable. Second, the principles of duplication and modularity. Duplication, a route with a parallel, an institution with a counterpart, a document with a recognized twin in another jurisdiction. Modularity, a load that can be split, a route that can be assembled from legs of different types. Third, an ethic of not wasting others' labor, honest measure, clear duty, timely information. Reputations sit on it, and weeks are saved by it. Fourth, respect for adapters' languages, interpreters, and also things and forms that explain the foreign in a domestic idiom. Without them, hybridity remains a taste for the few, not a working tool of a city. In recent centuries, Silk Road is invoked as a metaphor with increasing ease. That is no mistake if one remembers that the metaphor grew out of practice. When a museum displays a textile with a beloved pattern from 1,000 years ago, it is not only beauty, it is material proof that agreements about measure, weight, quality, and price made beauty possible. When a shelf shows plates with ornaments from several traditions, it is not only taste. It recalls markets and gates where a foreign form was accepted as ours if it was honest and clear. When planners trace new corridors and speak of roads of knowledge, of digital goods, of cultures, this continues an old lesson. Value rises where many connections meet and where trust tools keep pace with exchange. In this sense, the end of overland dominance was no end of the network. It changed medium, but kept its grammar. The years when caravans crossed deserts left cities a respect for yard weights and clean paperwork. The age of ports added skills of fast transshipment and precise navigation. Modernity contributed new counting formats and new ports that receive not ships, but data and ideas. None of this cancels the old. On the contrary, without old tools, new speed is often only noise. Hence the calm conclusion. Durable networks live not by one miracle, but by the discipline of many small decisions. Boil the transformations down to a few formulas, and they are plain. The network absorbed blows and replugged itself because it had several parallel media and a shelf of ready modules. Its institutions, from caravanserai to warehouse, knew how to migrate without losing meaning. Its people from interpreter to pilot knew how to render the foreign intelligible. Its cities competed not only in wealth, but in order. And its memory archives, samples, blanks, habits constantly supported repeatability. Without repeatability, there is no long-distance exchange. Without long-distance exchange, there is no Silk Road, whatever name is in fashion. Seen against this long perspective, the hero is not a single caravan or a particular harbor, but the capacity of very different people to agree on a form of life at a distance. That capacity builds invisible bridges. Across them move not only bales and baskets, but measured words, learned gestures, and patient skills. Bridges outlast regimes and tastes, and sometimes the continents across which we imagine the world. For that reason, the Silk Road deserves to be understood, both literally and broadly, as routes over sand and water, and as a technique of agreement among people willing to go far and return with things one can share, objects, knowledge, and confident formats for living together.